Okay, we all ready to get started? All right, first of all, I'd like to thank Chairman LeBeau for showing us a good example over the last several years, I guess, on how to run an efficient meeting. I hope to follow in his footsteps with respect to that. I'm not sure I can mimic his sense of humor, but I will make attempts from time to time. I will note that when I read this morning's Post, I thought it was pretty curious timing on his part to give this committee up as the combination of revenue is declining and the state of repair is being questioned, but perhaps he didn't have that information. Anyhow, beginning the agenda, I understand that there are no public speakers, so I'll dispense with the notice at the beginning of the meeting for that, and if we can move on to the approval of minutes from May 2011, if I have a motion. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay. Opposed? Carried. Okay. Moving on to the committee work plan. Okay. There are no changes to the work plan?
There'll just be an addition. We're prepared to give the committee a storm performance report.
Okay. With that one addition,
That'll be the third one.
we'll add that on to the end of the meeting. Okay. The report on operations and safety, I draw your attention to page 15. If we can have a report.
We'll do the operations report first. Dave Murray, give the report on operations.
Good morning. The operations report begins on page 15. I'm going to give the report in three parts this month. We start first with April, and traffic in April was 23,572,000, which was a decrease of almost 1 million trips over the prior April. The average price of gasoline for the month of April had spiked a great deal compared to the prior year. It's $1 higher, or it was averaging $3.91 in April this year versus $2.91 a year ago. Also, almost one half of the month, or about 14 days, we had recorded days of precipitation versus only 6 days in 2010. Easy Pass crossings for the month were up 0.5%. Cash crossings were down 18%. Passenger vehicle travel was down 3.9%, and trucks decreased by 6.6%. If you look at specific facilities, all facilities had fewer crossings than the prior April. The decline ranged from a 1.9% drop at the Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Queens facilities to almost 11% at the Rockaways. Let me turn to looking at the year-to-date so far. I think last month, Commissioner Capelli, when we were talking about April, you had asked a question about, well, what's going on here. So we went back and tried to quantify as best we can the reasons for the decline in traffic through April. Let me just first note that when we put together our budget in 2010, we included, obviously, a toll increase which took effect at the end of last year. Our budget reflected this increase, and based on the econometric forecast at that time that we received from the MTA, we forecasted a year-to-year traffic decline of 2.1%. This decline was a little higher than what we've historically experienced with Easy Pass, and that's partly because of the higher cash toll increase that that was approved, which was unlike prior toll increases for cash customers. So far through April, when you look at the first 4 months of the year, traffic has declined by 2.7%, which is 0.6% higher than what our budget expected. So in trying to figure out what might have been causing the decline, we took a look at our neighboring toll agency, the Port Authority, since the Port Authority had no toll increases in the first 4 months of this year or the prior year. And what we found was that the Port has experienced a 1% decline in traffic year to year through April.
So our decline is actually less.
Yes, it does decline, which is what you would expect because we had a toll increase on top of the higher gas prices and also the winter weather that we both experienced so far this year. So if you look at the factors, it's likely that about 1% of our 2.7% decline, if things are comparable, About 1% of the 2.7% are due to the same external factors that the Port Authority is experiencing, which is higher gas and the winter weather, which we know is miserable, while the remaining 1.7% is likely due to the toll increase, which is a little less than what we had forecasted, which was 2.1%. Finally, an early look at May. May's crossings this year were 25.1 million crossings, which was 900,000 fewer than the prior year. And if there are no questions on the operations report, I'd like to ask Andy Petrovich, our Chief Health and Safety Officer, to give a brief report on safety stats.
Good afternoon. On page 28 and 29 of 4 charts and 4 graphs covering the customer vehicle collisions and injury collisions and employee accident reports and lost time injuries through April. If you please note, the injury rate per million vehicles has dropped from 0.79 to 0.79 from 0.83, and that for the employees, the first 4 months frequency has dropped to 5.1 versus last year's 5.7. If there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions? Okay, moving on.
Moving on, Easy Pass performance report.
Thanks, Jim. The April Easy Pass report begins on page 31. The Easy Pass market share in April was 79.2%, up 3.6 percentage points from a year ago. As we've been discussing, the stronger growth this year is likely due to a combination of the December 30th toll increase as well as the lower discretionary cash travel that we've been seeing from the higher gas prices.
You know that's what it is when you see the RFK Plaza hitting 70%.
That's correct. That's a good point. More than 13,000 Easy Pass accounts are open in April, including more than 3,000 on-the-go accounts, which is 24% of the total open for the month approximately. We're now up to more than 103,000 on-the-go tags being sold since the program began. 76% of those have been registered. We've been working to add new retailers this year, and since January, we've added about 80 new locations, now have a total of 450. If there's more questions on Easy Pass, I'll go to the April financial report, which begins on page 37.
Alan, one question. We had a conversation maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago with Mark's leadership. One day runs into another day in that regard. About the ability to use Easy Pass at non-toll crossing facilities. That there was a movement to use them, or there was an idea to use them at large parking locations where there was a cost involved, whether at baseball stadiums or the Meadowlands or other places. Has anything happened with regard to that?
Yeah, I would say generally no, other than the fact that the Port Authority has a Easy Pass, what's called Easy Pass Plus, in all of their airport parking lots.
Right.
In the metropolitan New York area, it generally is not.
Is there a specific reason why not? Because it would seem to me that we have a number of places where people take their cars a lot of times. I was just happened to be at Citi Field the other day, the Mets game, and we had to drive, and I said to myself, why can't I use my Easy Pass to pay the parking fee? It would seem to be a very reasonable question for which there was no reasonable answer, or the Meadowlands or the Nassau Coliseum, or places where there are large number of people with automobiles a lot of times, not on a one-time basis, but at Citi Field it's 81 days. At the it just seems to be a perfect connection in that regard from a easeability standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had done an RFI a number of years ago for private companies.
I remember that conversation.
Yes, and there was very little interest from the private sector. I think part of it is the investments that are necessary, the antenna and the infrastructure. The cost per lane, so to speak, is high, and so I think it's mostly the equipment is made mostly for highways, and bridges and crossings, not really meant for parking. The Port Authority has obviously a parking lot that they operate 365 days a year versus the Mets, which have 80 home games. So, I mean, there's some differences in some of these. And, from time to time, there is an expression of interest, but it never seems to take hold.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Are there, good morning. Do you have any just sort of brief comments about, afternoon, right, on the Hudson, on the Henry Hudson high-speed tone?
We'll be giving a report to the committee next month, an in-depth report, first 6 months. So if you bear with us, we'll give the report to the committee next month and be open to questions. I would have to say that it is going fairly well, yes.
Any other questions? All right. We'll move the agenda here to...
Okay. The
Financial report?
Financial report.
Total revenue through the first 4 months is down 1.3% against the budget. The factors that we've been discussing, a reflection of the lower traffic due to the storms in January, as well as lower traffic from the higher gas prices and lower average tolls. April revenue specifically was down 1.8% against the budget. On the positive side, good news, total expenses were down in April by 3.9%, primarily due to lower labor expenses. Year-to-date, our expenses are more than $16.6 million below plan. Labor expenses are down about $5.8 million year-to-date, which includes $1.1 million in lower overtime. Non-labor expenses are $10.8 million lower than planned, and that's primarily due to timing in maintenance and other operating contracts, as well as materials and supplies. And our support to mass transit was approximately $295.6 million through April, which is about $22 million, or 8% better than planned. That concludes the financial report, unless there are questions.
So I just want to point on that. So even though our revenue was down, our contribution to mass transit continued to increase during this period of time.
That's correct.
Beyond what we budgeted. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, we'll go on to the capital program report.
Good afternoon. The capital program report is on page 49 of the book. In May, there were 11 commitments made totaling $14 million approximately, most notable of which was a utility relocation and upgrade construction project, RK65, that was originally planned for award in September at a budget of $32.7 million, and we were able to award in May. That project was notable because due to the competitive bid climate that's out there, we received a very competitive price. We had 12 bidders, and the actual low bid was $10.6 million compared to the budget of $32.7 million. Year-to-date, actual commitments are $57.7 million versus a planned year-to-date $307.2 million. And by way of explanation on the variances, the major contributor to that variance is a 2-month slip in the award of the replacement of the Queens approach of the Bronx-Whitestone Bridge, project BW89C. And that project was budgeted at $240 million. And again, because of the favorable market conditions and the large number of bidders, we received a very favorable bid of about $109 million approximately. We are in the final stages of reviewing that bid, and we hope to award that contract in July. The other components of the variance include a project at the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel for tunnel inspection and some other tunnel studies that was planned for award in March and is now forecast to be awarded this month in June for $1.5 million. And as I mentioned, the shortfall was somewhat offset by the earlier than planned award of the utility project at RFK Bridge. Also, we had a favorable variance with a construction administration project for the previously mentioned project at the Bronx Whitestone of about $3.5 million favorable variance. In terms of completions, there were no completions made in May. Year-to-date, we've completed, as planned, $76.7 million, and there were no closeouts in May, and year-to-date closeouts total $5.7 million. Unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions?
We'll move on to procurements.
Good afternoon. There are no non-competitive procurements. There is one competitive procurement this month, which is on pages 64 and 65. It is a request for the board's approval under the all-agency procurement guidelines to declare competitive bidding to be impractical and authorize Bridges and Tunnels to enter into a competitive RFP process for design-build services for the reconstruction of the Manhattan to Queens ramp at the Robert F. Kennedy Bridge. The budget for this project is $52 million over a duration of 2 years. There are no ratifications this month, and that concludes my report unless you have any questions.
We need a vote on that item. Okay, do I first? Second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the added item
Of the snow presentation.
snow presentation. We could try to move that along quickly because I do have one executive session item. It's going to take a couple of minutes. So,
Okay. As you know, the December storm caused widespread disruption to transportation and essential services. As you can see, there is a summary here of times and dates and what occurred during that time frame. Move along to the next slide. Pictorials of Bridges and Tunnels' response to the snowstorm. On the bottom, you can see the end result, which is the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Next slide, please. We reached out to our partners. Basically, there were two phases to the review of the process. Initial agency-led reviews leading to immediate improvements, and MTA-led in-depth review, which focused on looking across agencies and at other external peers to identify further actions. The outcome of the review process is a new report that is released today, copies that have been distributed to the committee during the meeting, and the report will also be posted on the MTA.info website. Slide 5, please. Slide 5. The review looked at many aspects of the storm performance and generated 25 recommendations grouped into 4 categories. These recommendations are broadly applicable across the MTA and encapsulate good practice in storm management. Basically, for the committee, Bridges and Tunnels performance, the review identified strengths and opportunities relative to performance in the December storm. We have acted quickly to implement a series of immediate improvements and are also pursuing additional improvements. Basically, Bridges and Tunnels responded well, mobilized early, uninterrupted availability at our Bridges and Tunnels. We utilized the GPS tracking of the snow equipment. B&T snow fighting vehicles were used to assist buses, and quick assessment and assurance of the fleet serviceability following the storm. Completed improvements or planned improvements will include updated storm management procedures, including formalizing posting of the technology department staff during severe storms in the command center to assist us with our many technical advantages at this point in fighting the snowstorm in our command center. Develop formalized procedures for providing snow fighting equipment or assistance to other agencies during snowstorms or other significant operating events. And it include line items in the future engineering contracts requiring contractors to provide snow removal assistance during severe storms. And that'll end the presentation.
okay. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank the entire staff from top to bottom for their terrific accomplishments and the support when I sat where you sat. They are innovative. I had no idea how hard it was to implement automatic tolling. It is really quite an accomplishment that they have done here. They are dedicated. They are sensitive to the workforce. They have spent, the senior management has spent most of their working life in the Bridges and Tunnels Department, except for Jim Ferrara, who I think has spent his entire life there. I'm sure as an infant he must have been doing something at some bridge in some tunnel someplace. I was very impressed with everybody from top to bottom, and my hat was off to you. You guys were amazing.
Commissioner LeBeau, on behalf of all the employees at Bridges and Tunnels, we wish you well and thank you for your support.
Commissioner LeBeau.
However, we will have all those countdown clocks up before you are finished now with automatic tolling.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have just one item I'd like to go into executive session for. It's for a matter. Do you have the language on?
Basically, I'm requesting to go into executive session on a labor matter.
Which is exempt under the public meetings law. So if we could clear the room.